My name is Julia, and today I'm going to be presenting the multicultural psychological racism, prejudice, and white privilege. So, what is multicultural psychology? Multicultural psychology is the focus within a large world of just genetic psychology. The part of this focuses on how cultures impact individuals' behaviors, emotions, social interactions, and basically how their culture makes them. So, what's prejudice? The meaning of prejudice is the judgment or the unfair treatment of someone or a group based on just the grounds of their race, their gender, their ethnicity, their sexual orientation, or their religion. An easy example of this is when someone mentions that they hate gays. They are hateful or judgmental to individuals who classify themselves a part of that group or that organization. The multicultural psychological effect of prejudice. When it's studied by the professionals, there are several common psychological effects. That is anxiety and fear, depression, low self-esteem, and when both of those are mixed, what can be caused is drug addiction or various coping styles that an individual might partake when they're feeling that anxiety, that fear, and that depression over and over, or when they're growing up. Discrimination. Discrimination is the treatment or the uncalled act on an individual based on the grounds of their ethnicity, their age, their sexual orientation, disability, religion, and honestly, a lot more that goes along those lines. An example of this could be refusing to rent or sell to someone just because of their race. And another example of this is a woman being paid less by a man for the same job. This would be a discrimination against women. The psychological effects of discrimination. When it was researched, there were many different things that popped up, but the most common ones were mental health problems. The individuals who experienced discrimination had increased risk for anxiety, depression, psychological stress, and the identity and self-respect. Who have experienced this, they may experience lower self-esteem, identity crisis, or conflict. Racism. Racism is the treatment of an individual or group of individuals unfairly based on their race or ethnicity. There are many, many different types of racism and different forms of it. For example, there's overt, covert intentional, colorblind, power evasion, adverse, covert unintentional, color evasion, and microaggressions. All of these are many different forms of racism, but when you dwell down to it, they all are just plain like racism. But once you think about it, there's different forms. Some real-world examples of each of them. Overt would be calling the COVID-19 virus the China virus. Adverse is hiring a white candidate over a black one, no matter the qualifications, just because they don't want somebody of that race in that position. Covert intentional is the voter ID laws, and this prevents minorities from voting. Colorblind is denying the existence or impact of institutional racism or discrimination. Covert unintentional is the All Lives Matter movement. Color evasion is saying that we're all the same or it doesn't make a difference. Power evasion are words like racism is not a real thing today, and microaggressions is racially profiling by law enforcement or saying things like go back home, you don't belong here. The impact on mental health. Racism can impact an individual's mental health on a countless number of ways. These are just the more common and more pronounced ones, which are chronic stress, increased anxiety, depression, race-based traumatic stress, social withdrawals, or limit or stop of mental health care altogether. The psychological effects. Racism has a deep-rooted multicultural psychological effect on how it makes an individual understand them. In a group scene, it is affected by, it can be a reinforced bias within a racial or culture, limited cultural awareness, and create incorrect or swayed beliefs about another. White privilege. White privilege is the unearned advantages simply because an individual is a white person in America. Many people who do benefit from white privilege don't even know that they have it. And this is because that they grew up with it. They didn't really know anything different, so they never knew that it was a thing that they had until they really thought into it. Examples of white privilege. There are many more borderline ones and many more pronounced ones, but these ones are when you're pulled over, you're not racially profiled. But in reality, you don't even really have to worry about that. You can easily find makeup shades that are always in stock. You can easily find employment, renting or buying a home without being racially biased. And this one sounds a little silly, but there's only white flesh-colored band-aids. The impact on mental health. So there are two impacts on mental health, the impact on white individuals and the impact of someone of color. So the impact of white individuals could be guilt, shame, or discomfort, social anxiety, the lack of racial diversity, stress, the impact on the empathy towards the color of people. And then the impact on the color of people could be chronic stress and anxiety, trauma and PTSD, internal frustration, mistrust, self-doubt, low self-esteem, mistrust with mental health advocates. The multicultural psychological effect of white privilege. White privilege is not just the advantage of one person or the disadvantage of another. It has an effect of multicultural psychology by shaping identity, mental health for cultural groups worldwide. Understanding these effects is a crucial part in promoting equality, mental health, and cross-cultural understanding. And those are depression, anxiety, feeling unseen or excluded, microaggressions, and a power imbalance. Who is affected by racism and white privilege? Racism and white privilege affects everyone in society, but ironically in very different ways. This all depends on racial identity and your social position. But here are the differences. People of color are directly affected by racism, but indirectly affected by white privilege, and then vice versa. White privilege is directly affected and indirectly affected by racism. Some historical background is that multicultural psychological racism and white privilege in the United States go back to the European colonization. After the Civil War, the Jim Crow laws gave white domination by segregation, policing, and restricted access to education and employment. Overall, racism, and because of this, caused chronic stress, identity conflict, and internalized oppression among the people of color. Would an individual be the same if these topics never existed? No, an individual would not be the same in the slightest if racism, prejudice, and white privilege had never existed. This is because these are three things that shape an individual's psychological, social, and cultural from a day to day. Their mental and emotional experience would change, their worldwide views and beliefs would be different, and their social relations within cultures would be different. These topics, they round people, and without them, they would not be the same. They wouldn't have gone through the same hardships. They wouldn't have gone through the same battles, and everyone would have just grown up differently, physically and mentally. And why do we study these topics in multicultural psychology? Racism, prejudice, and white privilege is studied in multicultural psychology because these topics are the backbone or the cure that shapes an individual's identity, development, and their mental health. These topics also include how someone sees the world around them. It determines how they interact with people, where they can and can't work, and what they wear. What would happen if these topics were never studied? If racism, prejudice, and white privilege were not studied, a lot of bad things can happen to not only the individual person, but society as a whole. Without this study, there would be a hole in understanding the real experiences and lives of many people, which would only cause harm. The misdiagnosis or wrong treatment of someone, the incomplete understanding of human behavior, professionals would be less prepared to work in diverse populations with people of different cultures or backgrounds, and continued racial trauma and mental health impacts would happen. An overview. Multicultural psychology examines how racial, cultural, and ethnical backgrounds shape someone's experience, behavior, and mental health. Overall, this puts into perspective and goes to show why someone who is who they are. The challenges one has to face when living and growing up, making them who they are, how they act, and what they do. Racism and prejudice involves negative attitudes, stereotypes, and discriminatory behavior that harms individuals and groups, that leads to stress, lower self-esteem, and identity challenges. White privilege is an unearned and sometimes unwanted advantage that white individuals often receive in a society. Advantages may go unnoticed, but they still affect people, and fair treatment to anyone other than white Americans. And then here are my references.